What you can expect on a cruise ship has changed a little bit over the last month or so as cruise ships start to loosen restrictions and the world starts to move beyond COVID-19. And today, I wanted to talk about the big changes to the guest experience you can expect up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and I'm always trying to keep you up to date with what's happening in the cruise industry. A lot has been changing with COVID-19. That's been really the norm and the trend we've seen since cruises restarted all the way back in June of 2021. With that in mind, I wanted to give you an update on where things are because I think it's really important to understand what the protocols are currently and what you can expect on board. After all, I feel your expectations when you go on a cruise ship are really important for a lot of people in order to properly anticipate what the overall experience can be. Now, the good news is a lot has been changing, and that's a result of two major factors. First and foremost, COVID-19 cases in general, whether on a cruise ship or on land, are on the downswing. That's great news altogether. This is just good news for society. I'm not even talking about cruising right now. But in addition to that, Royal Caribbean has also opted into the highly vaccinated program under the CDC's voluntary program for cruise ships operating from the United States. Now, among other things, it's allowed cruise ships to change a little bit of the protocols. And if you remember back when cruises restarted in 2021, Royal Caribbean did not require 95% or more of its passengers to be fully vaccinated. And as a result, they had different protocols than sister line Celebrity or even other cruise lines like Carnival Cruise Line. Well, that's changed now, and Royal Caribbean requires at least 95% of passengers and 95% of crew to be fully vaccinated. In fact, 100% of crew members are vaccinated. But beyond that, it's also a matter of giving the cruise lines a little more leeway in what they're doing. And the good news is there's been a lot of changes for the better in terms of protocol simply going away. So today, I wanted to give you a rundown about a half a dozen changes that have happened over the last month or so that are really important. I'm not just talking about the fact that face masks are optional. That's old news at this point, although if you don't know about that, well, surprise, you don't need to wear a face mask if you're fully vaccinated on board Royal Caribbean cruise ship while indoors. That's wonderful. But I'm talking about things that have changed more recently than that, and this can also impact your experience on board. Let's start with number one, and that is the self-service buffet is back for guests. Royal Caribbean has confirmed that beginning for sailings that's departed on or after April 2nd, 2022, guests can serve themselves instead of crew members at the buffet locations. This includes places like the Windjammer, the Solarium Bistro, and at private destinations like Perfect Day at Coco Key and La Badee. Grab-and-go dishes and single serving portions will continue as a permanent offering, according to Royal Caribbean, which basically means that if you go to the buffet, sometimes you'll find already pre-assembled salads and other foods that you can simply grab instead of having to take tongs and serve yourself. That's another option available to you as well, because they thought that actually people found that to be a really nice option to have. And so one of the requests from guests was to keep that, and so Royal Caribbean did so. This is a significant change because up until April, crew members would have served you at any of these buffet locations instead of yourself. Now, whether or not you like this change or not, I think there's some folks that probably prefer to serve themselves and others like me that just enjoyed having crew members serve you. Well, that's another story. And at the end of the day, that's how it was before the pandemic. And so for me, it's not the end of the world, but certainly it is a big change if you're going to the buffet, which may or may not impact you at all, but it's more about understanding what to expect while you're on board. Another change you should expect when you get on board a cruise ship these days is that you can't wait in your cabin before disembarkation. So one of the best changes also during COVID-19 was when the cruise was over on that last morning, instead of going to a public area to wait, you could wait it out in your stateroom. This was so much more comfortable because number one, you can lay in your bed. Number two, the kids could sleep in a little bit later. And number three, you weren't required to get out of your room nearly as early as before. Well, that has since changed. And as of the last couple of weeks, guests now are instructed to go to a public area to wait for their luggage tag number to be called. Now, this has no impact if you have the self-disembarkation. If you're taking your own luggage off the ship, then you just simply get off the ship when they call you. And of course, if you're in a suite or some other situation like maybe the key, you get special instructions for that. But I'm talking about everybody else who's got a luggage tag number that is waiting for their number. You'll no longer be waiting in your room. You're now going to be able to go to a public area, and you'll have to leave your room by a certain time and then wait for your number to be called to walk off the ship. This is a reflection of a couple different things. Number one, there's more people on cruise ships than there were before, and as a result, the crew members need to clear a lot more rooms faster, meaning they have to turn them over, get them ready for the next ship's passengers. When you only had, 40, 50, maybe even 60% capacity, that's not so bad. But with more guests, it means there's more demand, so getting guests out of the staterooms is more important. And beyond that, this is also a return to quote-unquote normalcy. Some of the protocols, some of the changes that were implemented, like this one, were something that I think a lot of people just enjoy. They thought it was a nicer change, right? In addition to things like lower capacity, self-service in the windjammer, right? These are things that some of us just enjoyed. It was a change, but we actually liked it. Well, some of them have to go back. Others will stay around, like the e-muster drill. That's not going anywhere. But in this case, you should expect that on the morning that your cruise is over, you got to go out of your room by a certain time and be depressed somewhere else while you wait for your luggage tag number to be called. Now, here's something that's changed back to the way it was before COVID, and it's for the better, and that is Adventure Ocean. I get a lot of questions from folks who are going on a cruise, and they want to know about what they should expect for Adventure Ocean as it relates to dropping your kids off there. During the pandemic, you had to register your kids for specific times. There was limited capacity in there, and quite frankly, it just ended up being a real problem. I brought my kids there a number of times during the pandemic, and it just became more and more crowded and more difficult to get a spot for my kids at Adventure Ocean. In fact, on our Christmas cruise, which was really during the height of the Omicron variant, we just gave up, quite frankly, as to dropping our kids off at Adventure Ocean because there just wasn't any availability. Well, fast forward now to today, they've actually opened it back up, and it's essentially back to the way it was, in the sense that there's no more restrictions on capacity other than the hard limit, which always exists in the room as a fire limit, right? You can only have a certain amount of people in any given room. That's the case with Adventure Ocean as well. But there's no more pre-registration in terms of needing to get a time, except for the nursery. That does not change. But for Adventure Ocean, for aquanauts and explorers and voyagers and the teen club, no additional signups in advance. You just simply register your kids like normal, but then you just show up and they get in there. And as long as they don't have every single kid on board, they'll have no problems in there. In terms of activities, that's all back with Adventure Ocean as well. Gaga ball and being able to touch things. There's no circles you have to stay within. And on top of that, the only real change, only difference between today in Adventure Ocean and pre-2020 in Adventure Ocean is that masks are still required by kids, whether they are vaccinated or not, in Adventure Ocean. Could that change? Sure, but as of right now, that has not changed. Another big change is something we talked about in a recent video, and that is there are just simply more people on board a cruise ship than there were in the past. During the pandemic, Royal Caribbean purposely kept the amount of people on board a cruise ship low during that initial restart process. And that continued for pretty much all throughout January and most of February of 2022. But beginning in March, and certainly going into April now, as we're in the spring break season, we're seeing cruise ships get closer and closer to truly 100% full capacity. In fact, we've already seen a couple of ships have truly 100% capacity on board, which is great news because that's a healthy sign of demand for the cruise industry and that they want to be able to get back up on their feet. At the end of the day, I enjoyed having half the ship to myself and not having to compete for chairs at the pool deck. I recognize that Royal Caribbean and the cruise lines in general are a business and they're here to make money. And the way for them to make money and get out of the financial hole that they've been in for about 2 years now with billions with a B of dollars in debt is to get back to full capacity. It's a necessity. It's not just a nice to have. They absolutely have to do that. And this is how it was. And listen, I loved cruising before 2020 and I loved going on ships. And the fact that you had, 100% capacity full ships back then didn't bother me at all. I didn't even give it moments of thought. It was just the way it was. Granted, I got used to having low capacity over the last year and a half, but I'm also okay going back to it because it's good for the cruise industry. But if you're going on a cruise coming up, whether it is this spring, this summer, this fall, you should expect that the capacity is going to be pretty much back to full, if not somewhat near there. Whether or not it's at 100% or 90% or 80%, who knows? You won't know till you actually get on board the ship. Royal Caribbean does not divulge in advance what the amount of passengers will be on any particular sailing. Basically, what you do is when you get on board the ship, after you set sail, go down to guest services and ask the guest services staff how many passengers are on board. They'll give you an idea of what that is, but there's certainly more people on board a cruise ship today than there were just a couple of weeks ago. Something else that's changed, and not for the best, I have to say this, although I think this is due to the supply chain, is that there's a lot less alcohol supply on board. Don't worry, there's alcohol. You're not going to go dry on a cruise ship. What I'm trying to say is certain brands of alcohol seem to be more hit or miss on certain ships. I've heard from a lot of different readers who have been on cruise ships and say that their favorite brand of whiskey or rum has not been in stock in all the bars. And on some ships, some sailings, the entire stock of a particular brand is not there, whether that's Gentleman Jack or Kraken rum or a certain type of tequila. Remains to be seen, but your expectation should be that perhaps you might have to go bar hopping to find a specific type of alcohol if that's important to you. Some people really don't care, but if you're certainly a Gentleman Jack kind of guy, if you're a Tito's or Kraken or Patron Silver type of gal, well, there's just a little bit less of that to go around across the fleet. So what that really means, again, is you may go to a particular bar ask for your favorite drink with that special type of liquor, and they may tell you they don't have it. In which case, you can go to a different bar and try to find it, and you might have to change up your usual if that's the case. Now, again, it's not to say that every sailing is like that, and that when you go on your sailing, that will still be an issue. The good news is supply chain issues are getting better, and things are improving on that front. But this has been a trend that I've heard from a number of different readers across a number of different ships for the last couple of weeks. And so I wanted to include it here because I think it's important to understand that when you go on your ship, a change compared to where it was not too long ago is they don't have the same levels of stock of certain alcohol that they did before. But again, there will be alcohol on board. I don't want to scare anybody by thinking that it's not the case. Just the reality is certain brands may not be available. Now, I want to end on a better note because running out of booze is not necessarily what to end us on, and that is that laser tag is also back. Love seeing laser tag back. Laser tag is an activity that was introduced not too long ago in the grand scheme of things, and it was very popular, but laser tag is back on cruise ships. So whether you're doing that or maybe even ice skating or both on your cruise ship, make sure you pack your sneakers so you have the proper attire for when you go on board. So there's my list of the things that have changed that I think are important to know about the guest experience when you go on board a Royal Caribbean cruise coming up soon. Let me know in the comments if you've been on a cruise in the last couple of weeks or months. What has changed that you've noticed? Again, not necessarily bad or good, just different than maybe what we were expected or remembered from cruising beyond that. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like button. Hitting that like button really helps us out. So if you can do so, I would appreciate it. Also, subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications. It's free to subscribe, and the notifications just let you know when we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.